Hi, and welcome to Conscious Awareness TV. Today is November 7th, and we are filming live in Escondido, California. And today we are going to be talking with Paul Marwood, co-founder of Soul Genesis, and he'll be speaking with us about soul activations. But before I get started, I really want to share with you about Conscious Awareness TV. And I guess there's been so much happening since our last show that has brought a lot of people into fear and out of themselves. And so what this show is really about is bringing people, having them go within, being very conscious of conscious living about what we're saying, what we're doing, what we're thinking, what we're feeling. But not only that, conscious awareness is about being in awareness of how are we being in the world. Because there's a lot of things that are happening out there in the world, and in order for us to shift and change things that are happening out in the world, we need to go within. And that's what these guests on the show are really here to bring with us and share with us ways that we can go within. So with that, I'd like to welcome Paul to the show.
Thank you, Linda. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, thank you for showing up today. And happy Halloween, by the way. So,
yes, happy Halloween.
Yes.
The kids are going to have fun tonight.
Yes. And thank you for all the viewers that are watching today. And if you are, please do, if you have any questions for Paul or myself, please let us know and we'd be more than happy to answer your questions for you.
Yes, thank you.
So Paul, soul activations, how did that come into being?
Okay. A wonderful co-creative process basically took place for the creation of these soul activations. In essence, what happened is several people, this is more sort of at a soul level. As souls, we had agreed to bring these activations through before we came down on this planet. And so that was kind of an agreement. And then at the right time, when all of us were at the right space in our lives and our right readiness, we were brought together. And there was a person that delivered a message from Archangel Michael, and that transpired. And all of a sudden, we were all brought together. And then we've since found out that as part of this coming together, allowed an opening of a vortex, which is the energies of the four souls. And then this vortex allowed this energy and information to flow. And then quite literally from the evening of the people getting together, this information flowed, and all of a sudden this teaching began for these soul activations. And it's been an ongoing process. And that happened, pretty much very early 2011, hence one of these soul activations is called the 111 activation, because it happened on the 11th of January 2011. And since then, more and more and more is coming through, because there are more and more activations that are necessary.
Well, when you talk about we, I don't know if the audience or the viewers or listeners really kind of understand when you talk about we. Who are you speaking of?
Okay, great question. Okay, initially what took place was a coming together of myself, Paul, and my wife, Holly, and a lady by the name of Christine Upchurch, and another lady by the name of Karen Keeney. And it was part of this arrangement. There was another lady involved as well as part of this process. And that created this, as I said, this initial opening of what happened, of this information as it flows through. And then with the spending time of us coming together many times a year to allow more information to flow and allow more teaching to take place, the first activation was then understood, and we were keen to get it out there. It's like, okay, let's do it. And the beings that were teaching us, firstly, wouldn't tell us their name, because they said that our message is more important. We don't want you to, as humans, we put things in a little box and go, oh wow, I'm talking to Archangel Michael or something. So they didn't want that to take place. So they said, just tune into the information, and if it's resonant with you, we'll continue, and if not, well, that will be the end. So of course the messages were just profoundly beautiful, and the four people, we were all just about in tears as this beautiful information came through and this teachings took place. So And basically that just continued to transpire to a point then obviously where we didn't need to come together anymore. We could allow this information would come through of its own accord. And a lot of this information actually came through my lovely wife Holly in the form of channeling. So
right, that's my next question. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And then, but the beautiful thing about this whole process, and I think as we all move forward as in our human form, we'll start to realize there's far more power in co-creation. So Holly's channeling this information, and the rest of us are listening and learning, but all of a sudden we're getting intuitive hits, and we'll like walk over and we'll pick up a book, and the book will have information that relates exactly to what we've just been taught. So there's like a real world validation taking place of all that we're being taught.
Right. So like synchronicity, when people, when things happen. So just kind of letting them know that it's, when those moments that you're thinking of something and all of a sudden something is a confirmation, you're like, wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of this confirmation, and as we're practicing, for example, these soul activations, someone might have their hand somewhere, and Holly's channeling, for example, and she's laying on the table saying, you need to have your hand here because that's the channel information. And the person's saying, my hand's already there. So, we're being guided in a way to this process, and then there's the double confirmation of Holly saying, but the person's already there. So it was a beautiful co-creative process for the first soul activation.
So what comes to mind, and maybe the viewers and the viewers and the listeners have this question, is that, when we hear voices or we hear things, how are you determining, how do you know that it's, beings, that it's other than this voice that I hear? Is there a distinction? I mean, can you kind of share with us about that?
Great question. I think for most of us, when we start that process, we have a lot of questions and a lot of doubt, and we sort of second guess ourselves. And for all of us, we've had those same questions in our own minds. Is this my imagination or not? The beautiful thing is that firstly, their guidance is to simply trust.
Yeah.
You trust the information as it comes through. The second thing is also, when you tune into what's happening with your heart, does it give you that feeling of expansion? Are you feeling contracted or are you feeling expanded? So that's another level of validation. And then also, if you continue on in that journey, all of a sudden there are additional levels of validation, like I mentioned, where someone in the room just walks past a book and they just get a download, and they pick up the book, and the very first page that they open the book to, and they read it, and the passage is the right passage, which is explaining just what was being talked about several hours earlier. So, and that's something you can't fake. That's something that's real. So then as part of what you mentioned earlier, am I just guessing this?
Right.
When you suddenly pick up a book, you can't fake those sorts of things. And then I think when you've played with it more, you start to feel, and you start to see, not so much see, but you start to feel the differences of these voices. The feeling of your internal voice, and you start to sense the energies or the beings, and you, just like you and I are talking, I know your voice. This is using my ears, but when you start to use your psychic abilities, the voice of different beings. It's a different feel.
Right. Which I've always, throughout my own journey, is when I realize that if it's coming, how I can determine if it's coming from the ego, if it's coming from a different place, is like the attitude, like the, well, last time you did that, it wasn't good enough. So it's like, I know that's not really my soul or myself that's really saying that that's coming from an ego place. Yeah. Something that you mentioned about the heart, and which I think is really important, because really all this work and everything that we're doing, which is really from the very beginning, is speaking, moving, thinking from our heart. Really, that's where we started, and then we kind of got into this, but we, downshifted way to this low density of being in a 3D world and the humanness of being human. And so you mentioned about being in the heart and expanding and kind of knowing that it makes me wonder, because I was teaching a open your heart class, opening of your heart, and a lot of people are like, well, my heart's already opened, and you kind of, yes, but really, what does that really mean? And so you're talking about this expansion of the heart. So let's go with that, because what I really want to let the viewers and listeners know too, that Mother Earth is a living being, and she is the heart of creation, and the heartbeat of everything. And love is what holds the planet together. It's those cohesiveness, that the glue. I mean, if you think about all the plants and the animals and how much their love, right, that creates this magnificent place where we live. Mm-hmm. So as I spoke about earlier when I was talking about conscious awareness and living consciously, is that it is coming, from the heart, and it's about going inside. And that's what the soul activations is, what you talk about when we posted this, about a synopsis of this is about, connecting to the heart and soul.
Correct.
Guiding with the soul, but you have to go inside. So, so what would you say to that? If people are out there going, well, okay, that's well and good, but I don't really, how do I know when my heart's expanding? How do I know that?
Yes. Great question. I think just taking a step back from what you were saying, most of us have this, if we move to this place of feeling instead of thinking, right, because the world that we live in generally is a world where we're coming from a place of decisions of our mind. We look at the situation and we say, okay, this is how it is based on our mind's judgment. And if we take that situation, and again, this is part of this conscious awareness that Linda's talking about, of expanding our consciousness, right, expanding our awareness, because the reality of the situation is that our conscious mind really has this much sort of grasp of what's happening around us.
1%, I think, is what Tom Kenyon said.
Yeah.
1%.
1%.
It's not a lot.
And that there's a lot more happening around us that we're actually than we're consciously aware of.
Right.
The beautiful thing about when we start to move to our heart is that it gets us out of the mind situation, right, and in the heart, the answers usually come in the form of feelings, right, which is why I mentioned earlier, do you feel expanded or do you feel contracted? So right, for most of us, we don't get words like you and I are talking in now. It's more right, of a feeling realm. Right. But the beautiful thing about that is we can still ask our heart questions, just like we ask questions now. And you can, for example, put two scenarios up in your mind's eye, and you can tune into your heart and you can ask one question, mm-hmm, is this the better answer or is this the better answer? And for most of us, instantly we'll get a knowingness. One will look brighter or one will feel better. There will be a difference between the two in a feeling realm, rather than the point of where our mind says, oh yeah, well, you'll get more money if you do this, so you gotta do this.
So it's coming from an ego.
That's coming from the
right,
ego. And so this is where, when we move to this place of the heart and the connection to the heart is connected to a lot more. And this is part of what we'll learn as we all move forward. And many of us know this already. But for those of you that are still on that journey and you're feeling things and you're not really sure what's happening, and it's like, okay, I'm getting this, but right, I'm not really sure what it is, and I need some help and some direction. The essence of it is that as you start to connect more to your heart is connected to an awful lot more. Right. There's a lot more information out there that's going on that your heart is aware of that your mind or your conscious mind isn't. And the beautiful thing about that is when you start to live your life where your decisions are based on guidance from your heart, what that does is it starts to shift your life into what we would call an alignment of your true self. So when you're aligned with your true self, people, places, events start suddenly to appear at the right time. You're wanting to do something, all of a sudden someone will appear that can help you with that. Or when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. Those analogies are very true. And all of a sudden things start to line up in your life. And you also start to live your life from a place where there's a lot more joy, peace, satisfaction, harmony.
Yeah.
And so that's where the guidance of the heart is very important.
Right.
And that's where part of these soul activations are very important, because they're tools, and they're not the be-all and end-all. The beings that have taught this to us did finally tell us their names, and their names are the High Council of Orion. And there have been other beings that have come forward that's both part of that collective, so to speak, that are all, even though they're separate, but they're all working together to help all of us on this planet to move to a better place. So they're guiding us and giving us simple tools that we can use to very easily incorporate them into our lives to help us shift forward, become more connected to our hearts, become more connected to our souls, and be in a better place ourselves, and tune into that guidance of our own guidance, which is right for us. Because the world we've lived in, we've gone to an accountant for accountant information, or we've gone to a lawyer for lawyer information, and we've gone to a teacher for teacher information. And those are still relevant, but when you're dealing with someone else that has their opinion and their aspect, they will tell you the best they can based on their perspective, but it may not be right for you.
Right.
So when you start to get into your heart will always do the right for you and give you the right answers to help you move forward in the perfect way for yourself.
Would you say it's a gut feeling? So when people have that gut feeling, that's when that might be resonate to some people as opposed to opening your heart.
Intuition, gut feeling.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And then you also mentioned true self, because we're gonna get to what the soul activations looks like, but I'm just kind of breaking it down for your listeners and viewers that are watching this, so you kind of have an idea of really kind of the birthing of this, and the meaning of the different words like opening your heart and expansion and true self. So that's my next question. When you say your true self, what are you referring to?
Okay, great question. Okay, for many of us, coming back to that analogy of our mind and our ego and our hearts, we have something that animates us. So without the something that animates us, we wouldn't be breathing, we wouldn't be living, and you and I wouldn't be moving and talking like we're talking now. So there's got to be something that animates us. And that something that animates us, most of us would relate to the word soul. So, or spark, whatever. People have lots of different words. So if you take the analogy of, say, the word soul, that's the aspect of us that's really something that animates us, and that's our true self. So many of you out there would say, okay, well, I have my personality and I make my decisions and this is how it is. And that's exactly right. But the thing to think about is that, remember, if we come back to the scenario where the conscious mind has 1% grasp on what's happening around, when you move to this place of your heart, your soul, your true self has access to a lot more. And an example of this in a much smaller, simpler example is, say, for example, I'm thinking about you as I'm walking around in my office, and then all of a sudden 2 or 3 minutes later you call me on your phone.
Right.
The reality for most of us is that happens too regularly to be just happenstance.
Right.
The reality of it is we are all connected to something more.
Right.
There's, if you could refer to it, some people call it like a unity consciousness or unity consciousness grid, a crystalline grid. There's lots of names for it. The essence is that we are all connected together, and so when I'm thinking about you, I'm sending out signals, you're picking up those signals, and you're going, and you just get this intuitive hit or this thing saying, I need to call Paul. And so you call me.
Right.
That's proof that there is connection to more. And that's where I'm saying this analogy, when you tune into your heart and your soul essence. Your soul essence, your true self, is connected to this more.
Right.
So when it gives you guidance on a decision, it can give you guidance on a decision that encompasses so much more. It knows more about how you can help certain things, certain people, certain events, certain things on a much bigger picture. So our conscious mind is looking at this. We see
Right.
You and I in this room, and we see the carpet and the walls, and that's basically the extent of what we have, plus the knowledge that we contain in our minds.
Right.
Whereas our soul essence can tap into so much more. And when it gives us guidance, that's where I say the guidance then starts to allow us to move in a way in our lives where people, places, things, events suddenly start to line up, because this guidance is connected to more. And as part of our manifestation, we all know manifestation, we all love manifestation.
Law of attraction. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
That's all tied in when you hear people talk about that, because when you're coming from a place of greater knowledge rather than the mind of this much, it can be connected to more, to allow more to line up. It's right for you.
Right.
So you're doing everything that's right for you to also help you in so many different ways, which then also allows you to help others in so many ways. This whole process is not only co-creative but supportive, which is what the universe is.
Right.
You know, most of us complain, oh, this happened to me and that happened to me and this is not good and that's not good.
Yeah.
The reality of it is, if you had an opportunity to listen to what Holly was saying in one of the earlier episodes, the universe is always in support of us. And even when something is not quite right as we would say, when you go into things like the soul guidance, the Akashic records, you start to learn that there's perfection in everything. And the whole universe is in support of us.
Right.
And there's always a lesson that our soul is manifesting for us to move us forward in beautiful ways, even though at the conscious level we're going, oh, why did this happen to me? You know?
Yes. Yeah.
But afterwards, whenever you take the moment and look back at those events sort of 6 months later, you go, I'm so glad that happened to me, because I got this out of it.
Right.
I got a new job. I'm much happier now, even though at the moment I thought, oh no, I've lost my job. You know, how am I going to pay the bills?
Right.
But now, 6 months later, you're earning more money, you're happier, you're more fulfilled.
Right.
And that's where this is important, with this connection to the soul guidance, because it takes you to the right places. And it could be a job, it could be
relationship, anything.
Yeah.
And that's not to discount the mind, by no means, because we do need our mind. And, you know, it helps us to drive a car, to do mathematics, things like that. But really, what you're saying is the heart is the truth. It's the knowing that it knows at such a deeper level and such a more vast, because it's connected to this bigger whole, whereas our mind is really only what we've thought about, or what we've learned, what society, what we've read, and classes and things like that. So let's go into letting them know, what does soul activations look like? Because you mentioned a little bit about the person's hand, and then Holly, you know, so do you do this as well, or is it Holly?
Yes.
So what does that look like, so people have an idea?
Okay. So there's many soul activations, and the beings that are teaching this to us said that there is an infinite number of these activations. And okay, why do we need an infinite number of activations? Why can't we have one that does it all? Because, you know, as humans we like to just take that magic pill, you know, the red pill, and all of a sudden we're there.
Yeah, because it's like, oh my gosh, we have multiple of activations. It's like, how am I going to get there to the end? It's going to take me until forever. There is no such thing as time and space, so... Yes. I mean, there is, but yes.
The reality of the situation is, and the High Council of Orion have taught us a lot of information over these 3 years. One of the analogies that explained to us, because we said the same question, why can't we just have one that does it all?
Right.
And they've said, for us to reach this place of ascension, we need to take on a lot of light to be able to ascend in a light form, so to speak, which is one of many ways. For us to do that, to take that on suddenly, our physicality couldn't handle it, and it would explode. So the analogy that they gave us is, if you were going to climb to the top of Mount Everest, if you suddenly were just dropped off on the top of Mount Everest, you would have altitude sickness and all sorts of things. You wouldn't be a happy chappy. Whereas if you work your way up Mount Everest and you acclimatize at each point, you can enjoy the journey while still being within your physicality in this case. So the purpose of the activations, and we initially thought that it was to help us hold more light, and then hold more light, and then hold more light. The reality, as it's transpired and more of these activations have been taught to us, is that they cover different aspects. What I mean by that is the first activation, which has been called the 111 activation, it's a multi-dimensional holographic structure that's placed in, through, and around a person.
Can you explain to them what the multi-dimensional, because that sounds like way
out there.
So we're gonna like get some clarification here.
Okay.
Yeah.
A part of this analogy of things being simpler. So everything that they're teaching us is moving to a greater level of ease, a greater level of simplification. So this is a structure that contains sacred geometry, and it's a structure that's created by a person's thought you could use the word telethought. So you're focusing on creating specific shapes and specific geometry. And it can be done, if a person is laying on the table, you can do it above them because it's been done in the quantum field. So it's done in a field, so it doesn't matter whether the person is with me, for example, present, or whether the person is on the other side of the world. In fact, 90% of our clients are around the world.
So when we talk about the quantum field, just let people know, this is like the quantum field, what is between you and I, this is the field, which I just really got that not too long ago, which I kind of knew, but not really knowing. Yeah, so I think that's important for people to, because the quantum field, what is,
The field is, if you can liken it to a simplification, say you have a radio station and the radio station transmits a signal, and then we have our radio and our radio receives the signal. If you can imagine the same sort of thing, but that's all encompassing. So this quantum field connects everything together. So the plant's in the quantum field, the plant has a connection to it, you and I have a connection to it. Everything has a connection within this quantum field,
right,
and it has an interaction in that field. So again, as we move forward, we'll start to learn that we really are more connected.
right.
This mind and ego part is creating a separateness, which is something that's not working.
Right.
The thing that is changing with all of us is to learn that we are all connected.
Right.
Part of this is this, you can imagine this field, we're all connected in this field. So these activations can be done in the field with focus on the creation of this multi-dimensional structure. The reason why I say multi-dimensional, because I'm using the words of what they told us in their teachings.
Right.
We're dealing with frequencies here that exist over multiple dimensions, and they're frequencies that affect us at the dimensional selves of ourselves. So, and some of the people out there might say, okay, well, what do you mean by that? Right. Here's Paul in his physical body. So this is a third dimensional physical body. And us as humans like to sort of quantify things. So here's the 3D body. And then most of us will know that we have light bodies. So physical, mental, emotional, spiritual bodies. Those light bodies exist, and they're just as real as this physical body, but they exist at a different frequency. So what that means is, for most of us, we can't see these other things or feel them, but that's because our eyes and our fingers are at the 3D frequency. If we were to shift to the other frequency, they'd be as real as our 3D body.
Mm-hmm.
So we have these other bodies, but we also have our consciousness. So starting at the bottom of the ladder, so to speak, we have our consciousness, which is capable of 1%, which is the consciousness that most of us sort of use every day. And then we can connect to our higher consciousness. And if you suddenly get this inspiration and you do something really amazing, you paint this beautiful picture, or you compose this beautiful song, or you just do something that's really amazing, and you go, wow, where did that come from?
Right.
It came from you. It came from your higher self.
Right.
And in some cases, as you say, it's your higher self that's starting to connect more, which is tied into this true essence, this essence of who we are, your higher self. And our consciousness continues to, as we go up in frequency, go to higher dimensions, and our consciousness exists on those levels as well, and simply connects to more. Right. And so where we're going, we will be able to connect better to those higher levels and connect to more. But right now we need a few training wheels to help us get there. And that's the purpose of these soul activations, because those in combination with the soul guidance and several other things are here to start to open us up to the more of what is.
So it's because it's like everything else. Once, if you've gained weight, it's not like you just gained weight overnight, or a relationship ends. It's just not that it just all of a sudden ends. There's like there's a buildup or something that's kind of happening. So with these activations, it's not. That's why there's so many, which I could see, because it would make sense that to all of a sudden bring this in there when you're like, oh my gosh, like.
Too much too quickly.
Yeah, too much too quickly. So it's, babies or kids don't just start walking. They may, walk faster, but they don't just get up and walk. So it is something that's tapping lightly and moving gently into that.
And the thing too with the activations, as I neglected to mention, was that they're all different. So they start to open up the different aspects of them more. So the 111 is holding more light, which brings us to a place of greater clarity, greater authenticity, and there's many other aspects of how it affects us. But the reality of it is it's bringing us closer to our soul, that guidance from our soul, which does give us greater peace, clarity, that clearer answers and guidance in our lives. And then some of these other activations, like the crystalline tree of life activation. It starts to connect us, which is also different, but what it does is it starts to connect us to the information grids, and which is part of this, as I say, your consciousness knows this much. As you connect from your heart to your higher consciousness and you connect to more, the crystalline tree of life activation is this beautiful activation that starts to teach us to connect to more, which is part of those information grids that are available out there. People quite often use the word unity consciousness.
Right.
So there's many grids, but for example, in this case, we can start to tap into that knowledge, and we can also start to tap into the beautiful grids that Gaia has that are part of the grounding process, and also access to more information from her level.
Right.
And what that does is that really starts to help us, again, as part of this process of lining up the people, places, events, knowledge, things, whatever it may be. So when we start to connect to more comes in. So we can manifest more based on what we desire to, and it could be all sorts of things. Most of us relate manifestation to money or something, but the reality of it is manifestation can be money. Bring it on, I say.
Yes.
It's part of abundance.
Yes.
But it can come in so many forms, because it could be manifestation of new abilities, new experiences, new events.
Right. So you were talking about, when you were saying how being in alignment, and then all of a sudden when you're connected to the soul, and this would be a really good analogy as well too, to kind of just to give them an idea that, how when people just, and it's sort of like when you said, when you just painted something and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, where did that come from? Or all of a sudden you get inspired into, it's like write a book, and it's like, I've never written a book in my life. And all of a sudden you just find yourself writing, and this information is coming. Because I feel that, and I guess what I really want to say to the viewers and listeners, it's really about being open to the possibility. Because once we open that gateway, we know that the mind is just that 1% of what it only knows, and there's this huge amount of information that's out there that we can tap into, is to allow that possibility to say, I don't know what I don't know. And once you do that, and that's really about conscious awareness, is really going, wow, okay, there is this possibility. And once you get the awareness of the possibility, and then you allow that opening, and with that opening, then something is able to slip through, and you're like, oh, and then something's different in your life. And then the more that you do that, the more that this
flows.
is, absolutely, the more that flows. And then the more that, so it really is, what I hear you saying is really about allowing, coming from the heart, and knowing that we have the mind, but we have these activations that one after the other. Because I know when you started talking about information in the crystal grid, people are like, well, okay, the 111 is one thing, and okay, now we're talking about crystal grid that has information. So it really is opening up the mind and allowing that possibility. So I still feel I'm not really quite sure what it looks like. So are people laying down? Are they sitting? Because obviously, if you're doing this, you had mentioned that a lot of your people are not in even the country or the states, or not locally here in California, but you work out of state. So are they lying down at their place?
Thanks for clarifying, Linda.
Yeah.
In essence, most people would be in a situation where you would lay down. The laying down aspect of it is simply allowing us to be in a peaceful place of being. We are beings, though most of us are actually doings. We do a lot and we sometimes do too much.
Great distinction.
Yes.
Yes.
So in most cases, if you were to be receiving one of these soul activations, the recommendation is that you would be laying down, and usually laying down in a nice, peaceful, quiet area. You could be, if you're at home, just lying in your bed, ask the kids to go outside and play, or ask your husband to, or your wife to just take the kids away for a while.
And no cell phone next to you.
And your cell phone, turn that off. Just take the distractions out of your life for a while, because for most of us, we need to honor ourselves. So in this honoring of ourselves, you lay down, you just connect more to yourself, you just be in this beautiful place. And then what happens, if you're in person, the person would, for example, be here on the table, or if you're at home, you're laying on your bed, the facilitator, and say, for example, myself in this case, would be creating this multidimensional structure, and all of the activations so far that we've been taught are all multidimensional structures. They're all different, but they're multidimensional structures. They are then done in the field. So even if the person's here, right here in the room with me, they're still done in the field. And then what happens is that structure exists in, through, and around the physicality of that person. So it might take, usually on average, about sort of 30 to 40 minutes to do one of these activations at an energetic level. So you would just lay in your bed, you enjoy, relax. Some people experience things and some people don't. And again, there's no direct correlation between what they experience in the moment and the activation, because the activation happens anyway. Right. It's nice to experience stuff because that is a level of validation too for many of us. We like to think we're feeling something. The reality of the situation is people that have said, I didn't feel anything, and then weeks later they're going, wow, this has happened to me in my life, and that's happened to me in my life. And then really, so once the person's received their activation sort of 30 or so minutes later, the beings that taught this to us suggest that you don't want to rush the person out of that space, because when you're immersed in these multidimensional frequencies, they give us so many benefits. You can't interact with these frequencies and not have benefits, basically. And so one of the questions we asked was, what happens if nothing happens? And the clear guidance they said to us was, something always happens. If we don't physically observe something, it's because it's something happening to us at a level that we're just not perceiving with our senses. And that's okay, because again, it's coming back into this realm of trust.
Yeah.
The reality of the situation is you then relax, maybe for another half an hour afterwards. So if you allow yourself an hour in your day, you can enjoy that activation. You then come out of it. The recommendation is, again, drink plenty of water, because in dealing with these things, the water helps the body deal with these changes that are taking place. And then really the beautiful thing about it is these activations that we've been taught so far, most of them, all except one, is only ever done once. And the benefits continue on. So as you move forward in your life, the benefits become more obvious sort of 6 months plus onwards. Because when you start to look back at your life from the date that you got your activation, you go, wow, the 20-year relationship with my mother, has suddenly fixed itself. Wow, my relationship with my boss is suddenly so much better. Wow, I'm getting on with this. Or I always wanted to do this hobby, but I could never be bothered doing it. But this alignment with the self is like your soul, your true essence is guiding you. Do that hobby. It'll bring you joy. It expands your light. And something you're doing your hobby, for example. So there's all these things that start to happen in your life, which are always for the greater benefit of yourself, bring you to a place of greater love, joy, happiness, satisfaction.
Right.
And then other aspects of your life start to line up as well. So your relationship with your partner could increase, to a deeper level. We're all different, so it affects us in many different ways.
Right.
But that's sort of the analogy, and some of the items I've mentioned is what sort of commonly happens to most people. Another thing is some of these habits that we're trying to drop that are not really serving us. Suddenly with the 111 activation, for example, are much easier to drop. You can just let them go and you get on with the things that you want to do.
Right.
So again, as I say, each of these activations are tools to help us connect to more, and they help us do it more easily. So we can still get there anyway.
Right.
But if you've got, if a child were to jump on a bicycle without the training wheels, they would fall over many times and they'd hurt themselves, and there'd be your self-confidence would be a bit dented and damaged. Yes. And it would take you longer to learn to ride your bike. Whereas put these training wheels on, and within moments you're riding around the yard, you're having fun. Let's have fun in our lives. Yeah. Same thing. You're having fun. These activations are supporting you and allowing you to move forward in sort of a certain amount, depending on where we're at in our lives.
Right.
And it doesn't matter whether you're a big spiritual guru or whether you're someone that's really just starting your spiritual journey. These activations help us anyway. They kind of meet us where we're at and help us move forward in a way that's in some cases very profound, and in some cases a little bit more subtle, but they still assist us to move forward in our lives.
Right. So what's coming up for me is a question of asking, when we're tapping into another human being, and I guess the question would be, does one have to allow, well, of course, but the question is, does one have to allow you to do this? So in other words, if I'm coming to you and I'm really, I'm not believing this, I'm not, I'm like, I'll take a chance. So what is your thoughts? I mean, does it have to be where we're willing to be, it's like hypnotists, when you go to a hypnotist, you have to be really wanting to have that experience at some level in order to break through. That's my experience.
Yes.
So is that true with this?
That is truly a wonderful question. The honest answer to that is there seems to be many factors in this process. Firstly, from what the beings have taught us, is you cannot interact. If you interact with these frequencies, you will have changes, because they're saying that you can't interact with these things and not have them affect you in some amazing ways. As I say, what they're teaching us is that for some of us that don't observe the change over time, 6 or 12 months, there are still things that have changed within us. We just either haven't taken the time to look back at it and see those changes. And I'm just going to digress just for a second. Yeah. The whole process happens so naturally because we are moving to a more natural state of ourselves rather than the ego-controlled state.
Right.
That we don't often notice it because it's not a step change. What we're talking about now doesn't create a step change in our lives. Step changes are usually very uncomfortable, hence the many activations. So it allows us to start to move into this beautiful place gracefully with more love and more connection. So unless we take the time to look back, we may miss some of the beautiful things that are happening in our lives.
Right.
And really, you can almost liken it to something like a prayer, where, a prayer can only do good for a person. It doesn't do bad because you're dealing with something that's of the love higher frequencies.
Right.
And this is in those same realms where you can do it for people. And even if the people don't understand it, or they don't even necessarily want it. Say, for example, you would like a 111 activation for your father, for example, okay? And you know that he doesn't relate to these things, he's not spiritual, but you would like it to be done. The reality of the situation there is it could still be done for your father, and it would meet him at where he's at and help him to shift forward in a way of where he's at.
But isn't there kind of a permission thing? Because I know there's probably people out there that are going, well, wait a minute,
Yes.
We have to get permission, especially when my father, hey, I have to get permission from him. We just can't be tapping into someone else's soul.
Great question.
Yeah.
Okay. take the analogy again back of the prayer. So if I were to say a prayer for you, I don't need permission for you to say a prayer for you, because it's something that's of the higher frequency, the higher order of the heart, the love, and ultimately it can only provide you with benefit. So if we look at the full scale of what potentially can happen, is if the soul is not ready and the soul itself is saying no, nothing happens,
Right.
so to speak. The soul doesn't take the activation, because remember, the activations that we are doing here are really done at a higher level than you and I at our conscious 3D self, because it's multidimensional. So we're interacting with the field, and we're interacting with the soul and the higher consciousness of that person. So there is an interaction happening at that place. And if that person's soul, and to tell you the truth, I know these activations have only been in existence for 3 years.
Right.
I myself haven't been aware of one instance yet where the person hasn't taken it on, or the soul has rejected it, so to speak, and nothing's observable has happened. And then something similar to that, I'll just tell a brief story about my father. My father is not a very spiritual person. You know, he enjoys his television and that aspect of things, and so there was a part of me that was a bit, you know, should I really do this for my dad or not? And if I ask him, he will probably feel uncomfortable about me asking him. And what that created within my own knowingness, and the reason why I say this, because this is a slightly different answer to your original question, is I knew within myself that it wasn't right to do it without his permission. So this is again where we come back to the situation where you tune into that inner guidance. And the inner guidance knows that unless you don't get permission from the person, it's not the right thing. So if I'd done it anyway, his soul would have probably rejected it. But anyway, we reached a point in our relationship where I asked him, and he agreed. And I did the 111 activation and another activation called the Universal Sphere. And things changed in our relationship. You know, he's sending me beautiful emails of, you know, nature and ducks and birds and stuff like that, of a more connected level that he didn't do before.
Right.
So he's shifting to a place as a person, and he still is who he is, but he's shifting to a place of more. You know, he's connecting to more in his own way, and it's, as an observer, it's beautiful to watch, and it brings so much joy when you see your parents shifting in a way that's connecting them to more, and it's in their own way. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And so have you felt, because our probably time is coming up, and I want to get to how people can get in touch with you, but do you find that there is a lot of people that you, in these 3 years, have you done a lot, and have you seen a lot of results from that?
Yes. In some cases, as humans, the beings that teach us this laugh and joke to us, because they say that everything happens in the energetic realm first and then manifests into the physical realm later. And they joke with us humans that we humans have got it back to front, because we need to see physical validation and physical tests and results before we believe it, when the reality of it is it really happens energetically first.
I believe it when I see it.
Yeah,
Instead of closing it, I'll see it when I believe it. You know?
Yes. So yes, we have done some tests. An example of such a test at the, and this test is indicative only. It was one person. One person was in Australia. The person that did it was in Portland here in the United States, and we did the Universal Sphere for this person, and they used a scientific device called a GDV, which is a electroluminescence measurement device created by a Russian scientist called Konstantin Korotkov. It's an amazing device, but I won't go into the details of that. But basically the results we got from this, we were very, very surprised of how significant and in a positive sense all of the results were. But that's indicative it's one person. We haven't done a great big study.
Right.
But the proof for myself and the practitioners that do this, because we've taught people how to do this, and that's our purpose, is to teach more and more people to do this so they can do it for others. As part of this co-creative process, we've got practitioners in Australia, Japan, South America, Canada,
Wow.
So all around the world, and the feedback from all of us, because we are all connected and we share information, is people keep getting their stories from their clients of such wonderful shifts that are happening in their lives.
Right.
So at a human level, the word of mouth and the testimonial, of someone saying from their heart, wow, thank you so much for what you did, because
Right.
I can't thank you enough for how my life has changed in beautiful ways.
Yeah.
And there's so many modalities out there that people will resonate with, and I'm not saying that these are
Right.
the be all and end all. I feel that people are drawn to this, and the beings that taught us this said that many people will come to you and they don't even understand why. They're just part of that gut feeling, that instinct. I know I've got to be here. I don't know what it is, and I don't understand it. It's just do it because I know I've got to be here.
Right.
And they have these beautiful changes in their lives, and
Right.
it helps them move forward.
And it sounds like it's a lot about self-empowerment too, because we really do. It's not that, we talk about the heart is going within, which is going into the heart. It's an inside job, and it's not to say that you shouldn't go out to outside, people that are outside of yourself to find what you're looking for within inside, because we do have all the answers, but sometimes we can't even get inside, and so we need the assistance of someone on the outside to help us in. But in the end, this is really, really all about self-empowerment. It's empowering ourselves to be able to heal ourselves. But once it's expanding and opening your awareness and the possibility to allow all this in, to be able to have that availability to be able to make a difference in your life as well as the others.
Yes. And the High Council talks a lot about what they call this word, the ripple effect.
Yes.
As we love and respect and enjoy ourselves, our love, our light, our energy, our frequency raises higher and higher and more, and everything around us gets affected. Our partners, our children,
Yes.
our friends, our work colleagues, everything, even this plant, that's between Linda and I, gets affected by where we're at.
Right.
And this is the beautiful thing about looking after yourself and moving forward, because
Absolutely.
then everything helps everything else and it ripples out.
Right. Well, it's about changing the world. I mean, we want to see the world change because of all the things that have happened, the government closing, and who knows what they have with the money in the bank. So all of this it's really for us to step forward really now and go within and really do the work on ourselves to be able to make a difference in the world. So how can people get in touch with you and find out more about Soul Genesis and those soul activations and what you guys do? So if you can let our viewers and listeners know, that would be great.
Thanks, Linda.
You're welcome.
We're actually just going through a rebranding process. So currently we have this beautiful website called Akasha Healing Studio. So if you just Google or type in www and then the word Akasha, AKASHA, and then healingstudio.com, that allows you to get access to the activations, the soul activations, information there that allow you to understand it, because some of us like to do a little bit of research first and
Yes.
understand that part.
Yes.
And also on that website there's the telephone numbers and email addresses that you can very easily contact Holly or myself, and we're more than happy to answer questions. There's another website also called Orion Network for Evolution, so www.orionnetworkforevolution. That's another company which is part of the coming together of these souls to create these activations.
And how do you spell Orion so they kind of know that?
Certainly, ORION, Orion, Network for Evolution. If you go to that website, it also talks about these same activations, they're the same thing. And there's also a practitioner directory on that website, so you can then go and connect with other practitioners around the world. And when you see their face, you connect to them and you resonate them and you say, I want that person there.
Right.
And so you can choose that person, and then you can contact them through there, and they can do the activation for you.
Beautiful. Well, we want to thank you so much for being on the show today. It was just a delight to hear, and to, another way of being able to tap into our heart and soul and really finding out and going within, and, this journey of evolution and growing and what we can do. So we really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. We want to thank all the listeners and the viewers out there who listened today. We want to thank our cameraman who's all made this possible, and of course Paul and Holly who are allowing us to be able to film here at Akasha Healing Studios.
Pleasure.
We would not be able to do this without all your support. And for those of you who have missed the show and were not able to view us live, you can go to our YouTube channel, Conscious Awareness TV. And if you subscribe, you'll be able to, they'll send you information as to when the shows are up, and you can check all the archive shows. And also, if you love the show, which we hope you do, like us. So we're trying to really get this message out there from all of our guests who are on the show. And again, thank you so much for viewing today and really being a part of humanity. So we look forward to tuning in next week, November 7th. We will have on Amara Satyai, and she will be speaking to us about healing hearts through the voice of oneness. So we look forward to hearing her next week, and thank you so much for joining us today.